This video covers the retest review 7 over special linear functions. So we are asked on problem 1 to write the equation of a line parallel to y equals negative x plus 4 that goes through the point 5, 2. So parallel means you keep the same slope. So my slope right now is a negative 1. I will keep that the same. And then I am given a point. So I'm going to plug into point slope form. And on this test, you are free to keep your answer in point slope form or to convert it. So in point slope form, it would be y minus 2 because that's my y. M is negative 1, x minus 5 because that is my x. If you convert it, you would get negative 1x plus 7. So that is completely up to you. Either of these answers are acceptable. So if you just want to write it in point slope and move on because you know how to put it in point slope and the converting is where you're nervous you'll mess up, then that is totally fine. Problem 2, they want a line perpendicular. So perpendicular means the flopposite slope. So we take 3 1/3 and flip it to 3 over 1, which is just 3. We take a positive and we turn it into a negative. So we flip the fraction and change the sign. So to go through point slope again, we will have y plus 1 because that's the opposite of a negative 1. My slope of negative 3, x minus 9. If you convert it, like solve for y, you should get negative 3x plus 26. And again, either of these are acceptable. So before you go in for that retest, make sure you know which way you're going for. In order to get here, you have to start here. So if you just want to stop there, that is totally okay. Problem 3 wants the equation of a line that is parallel to the x-axis and goes through 3, 7. So when I do these problems, I draw myself a little grid. I have a y-axis and an x-axis. Goes through the point 3, 7. So 3, 7 goes to the right and up. Doesn't have to be exact. And then parallel to the x-axis means it's the same as the x-axis. So if I draw something that looks, something that looks like the x-axis, it looks like this. That is going to be a HOI. So with a HOI, the equation is y equals the y from the point that you were given. So the y of my point is 7. And then with a slope, my slope, the O in HOI tells me it is 0. So you can write 0 or put a 0. 4 is very similar. We have our XY pretend grid. My point was here, and this time they want to go perpendicular to x. Perpendicular means goes against x and crosses x. This is a vux. So the slope is going to be the undefined. That's what the u in vux tells me. And then the equation is going to be x. That's what the x in vux tells me. Equals x from my x point. Problem 5, they want me to determine if the equations are parallel, perpendicular, or neither based on what I know. So in order to figure this out, I am going to have to solve for y in order to determine the slopes. So I'm going to solve for y, and y equals 3/4 x minus 1. For this problem, 2 things I can do. I can solve for y the same way I just did. I can also find my x and y intercepts. Because I just solved for y, I'm going to solve for y again. So I move 4x to the other side. 3y equals negative 4x minus 6. Divide everything by 3. So y equals negative 4/3 x minus 2. Remember, if you are not super comfortable solving for x, you can also let 4x equal negative 6 and 3y equal negative 6. Solve for x and y and put them in stat. To answer the question that I was asked, I have a slope of 3/4 and a slope of negative 4/3. So 3/4 and negative 4/3 are compared as flopposites, which would be perpendicular. Number 6, y varies directly with x, and y is 84 when x is 16. Write a function that represents this situation. So varies directly is the point 0, 0. And then for this point, x is 16, y is 84. So I'm going to plug this into stat edit exactly like I see it. So I'm going to show you these steps. Oops, sorry. So looking at my calculator, I'm going to hit this stat button and enter. I'm going to type 0 and 16, and then 0 and 84. So I've plugged it in exactly like I wrote it. Then I'm going to come back to hit stat, scroll to calc, go down to 4, enter, 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 and I have 5.25. So they want the function. Remember, slope has to be written as a fraction. So I'm going to take 5.25 and click math, enter, enter, and I get the fraction 21 over 4. So when I go back to my function, y equals 21 over 4x. Remember, the fact that it varies directly explains why I do not have a y value. A b value, a y-intercept value. So there should not be anything else that follows. Problem 7, miles y varies directly with time x. If a group of 2 birds floating down the river went 9 miles in 2 hours, how long did they float for 4.5 hours? So miles over hours is what I'm dealing with here. Now you have 2 options. The first is to do something like we did on problem 6, come up with your equation and then plug in 4.5 for x. Your other option is to set up a proportion. So if I set up a proportion right here, we know they went 9 miles in 2 hours, and we want to know how many miles they can go in 4.5 hours. To solve this, I'm going to cross multiply. So 9 times 4.5 is 40.5. 2 times x is 2x. And then divide both sides by 2, and x equals 20.25 miles. Alternatively, you could plug in the point 0, 0 because it varies directly, and then 2 hours for 9 miles. And if you do that, you would get the equation y equals 9 halves x. And then you would plug in 4.5 times 9 halves and get 20.25. So you can do either option. You can set up a proportion if you feel comfortable with that, or you can plug into y equals like we did here and then take it a step further if you feel comfortable with that. Problem 8 asked me to find the rate of change between these 2 points. So I'm going to go back to my calculator. So to find the rate of change, I'm going to click Stat Edit. I'm going to type in the 2 points exactly like I see them. So I'm typing my 2 points, 2, -3, and -1, 9. Make sure they are right across from each other, just like you see them on the paper. Then I'm going to come back to Stat, scroll to 4. Oops, that was 5, sorry. Stat, scroll to 4. And my slope is -4. So this was Stat, Edit. And I put in 2, -3, or -1, 9. Then a parallel slope would be the exact same slope, so -4, the exact same thing if -4 is -4. Perpendicular would be the flopposite, so 4 would turn into 1 over 4, negative turns into positive.